treasuries, they met in Berlin and said, why don't we just partition Africa and share Africa amongst ourselves? And we call it colonies, right? So that was how colonialism started on the continent of Africa. And everybody in Europe that had a gun went to Africa in search of people and resources that they could control. So the Italians, went as far as Ethiopia, but they weren't so lucky. They were defeated in Ethiopia and they ran back. They had the brief states also in Libya, and that was how Gaddafi came about. I think Gaddafi was known to have told one of the colonial masters when he was expelled from school as a rascal when he was younger, that you drove me out of class, I'll drive you out of this country. And that's what they went out to do. But they never forgave him for doing that, yes. The Brits went to Nigeria, they colonized Ghana, and a number of places. Even Portuguese people went and colonized Angola, and I think Guinea-Bissau. The French weren't too nice. They colonized everywhere they could find. They sent some of their worst characters to go and govern African colonies. In fact, when there was a struggle to kick them out of, I think, Guinea, they were so upset that they removed even all the telephone poles, including cash register, because the guy who was the colonial master there was 20 years old boy. He couldn't just understand why these Africans wanted independence. So when the independence war was won, they removed everything they could. In reality today, the French government never left Africa to be by itself. They control the economic life of Africans that were their former colonies. They intervened wherever they wanted. So they've helped a lot of African dictators to remain in power, including one of the African relics known as Paul Biya in Cameroon to today. So that's the history of Africa in a nutshell. So when you're hearing about Africa, you're hearing about bad governance and dictatorship, there's collective blame to go around, especially where people have been hypocritical about good governance, they've been hypocritical about what I would call democracy and human rights. It's just like you look at America today. America double speaks about democracy and human rights. When the Saudi Arabia, they are fine with, the Saudi Arabian monarchy, and up to the point that they are so good with Saudi Arabia that the Saudi Arabian leaders could go and kill a journalist, and America will say to you, hey, yes, it's a bad idea to kill a journalist, but we're still going to continue to do business. We just got huge orders for our weapons from Saudi Arabia, so we have to keep it while we find out who killed the journalist. By now, everybody knows who killed the journalist Khashoggi, right? Jamal Khashoggi. But America doesn't care, and I've lived in America for 19 years. I can tell you, that's America for you. So, and then you look at Nigeria. What is the primary interest of the West in Nigeria? Resources, oil. And as long as there's flow of oil out of Nigeria, they don't really care much about human rights. In fact, in the last 20 to 30 years, the critical violators of human rights in the Niger Delta region of Nigeria, the oil companies, American companies and British oil companies, French oil companies, Italian oil companies, they are also the greatest promoters of corruption on the continent. There's an investigation going on in Italy over how ENI, Egypt, bribed Nigerian officials. Siemens has been involved in bribing Nigerian officials. Halliburton in the US has been involved in bribing Nigerian officials. And you go beyond that also, where corruption is not being aided by oil companies, they are being aided by British and American, European banks, including Switzerland. Switzerland will tell you that they've never been engaged in war, they're a peaceful nation, but you can steal and rob your country and go and keep it in Switzerland, they're fine with it, Up until recently, where they reluctantly give back some of the stolen wealth out of Africa. I'm just giving you this background experience to let you know that when you talk about leadership in Africa, you have to understand, are Africans really leading themselves? Or you just have puppets on the continent of Africa, leading Africa and reporting back to They are colonial masters or neocolonial masters. I don't know much about what Australia is involved, and how much you guys are involved in Africa, so you might be blameless today until I find out about you guys. Yeah, but I'm sure somewhere, somehow, you have economic interest somewhere on the continent of Africa. It's just not obvious. And where you are not doing it, obviously, you are probably part of, the big gangs out there who is like, yeah, you look the other way when they're doing bad things, and that's as bad as being complicit as well. So I'm speaking this directly to you because for Africa to find its feet in the world, Africa must be led by authentic African leaders, not puppets. It's that Africa must find its real independence. I think you guys are lucky that you used to be governed by, the Brits, right? I think, yeah, colonized by the Brits. But now you have your own government, and your unit of measurement is even different from theirs. You don't play soccer, you decide to play rugby. We are not that lucky in Nigeria. We don't have a local league. Everybody is supporting the UK-based premiership. Every day. It's crazy how colonialism is not only, physical. Even after they've left physically, mentally, Africans are colonized. It's what we call colonial mentality, sung by fella Nicola Kukuchi that he mentioned before. Mentally, Africans in Nigeria are killing themselves. Practically, shooting and killing themselves over who wins and loses during the Premiership League. And they're poor. It doesn't reduce their poverty in any way. It doesn't improve their lives in any way. But if you're not a Man U fan or an Arsenal fan or a Chelsea fan, you're nobody in Nigeria. So that's what they call seriously colonial mentality. So I'm reaching you with that background so that you can understand very much what Africa is today or where Africa is today. But in some ways, there's some flicker of hope and good news, and you probably have heard about Ethiopia recently. Ethiopia used to be governed by brutal dictators, but they realized the futility of their own brutality, and the new leadership has emerged out of Ethiopia that is doing interesting things, including letting go of prisoners of conscience. There's less crackdown on dissent. I heard, and I'm not sure of this, but I'm not misquoted anywhere. Today, I think they have for the first time a female president because the old one there resigned, and there's a younger person who is now the premier of Ethiopia, who is doing so many interesting things. So, just in a nutshell, what Africa needs is a generational, transfer of power. There's a huge generation of Africans out there who have gotten out, seen the rest of the world, had the best exposures they need to understand how the world is working out there, and they are willing to come back and take Africa to the next level, so that Africa is not seen as this place you must go and find resources, but a place where you can go and interface and interact with real people. When I start my classes every year in the US, I show a movie to start my class. It's a movie, you've probably seen it before, The Girls Must Be Crazy. And I ask my students if they believe Africa is still like that. They say, yes, I can't wait to see Africa. And their own concept of Africa. Yes, it's what is in that movie, is like Africans running around without clothes on, and someone throwing the bottle of Coca-Cola down, and African worshipping the bottle of Coca-Cola. It may not make much sense to you, but look, if you look at it, what is it that Africans are worshipping? It's something that someone transferred to them to tomorrow, because they abandoned everything they know or they've ever heard about, and it is what the white person brought. The white man brought to Africa that's authentic to Africa, including the sports, everything that is not out of Africa, that's not from Africa, is what Africa sees as authentic. But this new leadership that is coming the way of Africa is going to make things different. It's going to interact with the rest of the world differently because we understand the world. We are going to try to process our own goods and services without having to send cocoa, for example, to Switzerland to be processed into chocolate, which is always amazing to me, in that you have to send cocoa to Switzerland that doesn't grow cocoa and it's made into chocolate. And most Africans who grow cocoa have never tasted chocolates before. Yeah, and if you show it to them, they're like, wow, this is interesting. So it reminds you of the Gospels of Crazy. Like, somebody throwing a wrapper of chocolate out of the car, and like Africans are like holding on to it, like the wrapper was like, wow, we've never seen this before, and they start worshiping it. But cocoa is from, Ghana, Nigeria. Same thing with oil. Crude oil is taken out of Nigeria. Nigeria used to have refineries, but we don't have refineries anymore. We take them out. They are refined and they bring back just gasoline, petrol, or kerosene, and we queue up. In Nigeria, the people still queue up to buy kerosene, and crude is taken out of Nigeria. We've made over $600 billion from selling crude to the rest of the world in the last maybe 60 years or so, after the first discovery of crude in 1956 or thereabout in the Niger Delta region. But the truth also is that the kind of leaders that Africa has produced have, in Nigeria in particular, successfully stolen 400 billion out of the 600 billion that we've made from that. But where can you find them? You find their houses in France, they bought houses in the UK, in the US, and now the United Arab Emirates is where everybody is headed. In fact, one of the candidates for Nigeria's presidential election next year, who is cited in a lot of corrupt activities, is right now vacationing in the UAE, Dubai, as we speak. Just as I'm running around here, I'm also a candidate trying to mobilize Nigerians in the diaspora to see how we can all return back home and make Nigeria a solid place, so that your next vacation will not be done in Jamaica, or some cozy island somewhere, but you want to go to Nigeria, you want to go to Ghana, because this is the best places you can go to, where you can find sunshine all day long. I think here, the sun rises too early in Australia. I came in 6 a.m. and it's already bright everywhere. In Nigeria, you have to wait until the cock crows before you wake up. And that's lovely, it's natural environment, I'm now doing tourism promotion to you guys so that when the president come visit Nigeria. So amazingly, that's what the kind of leaders we've had on the continent of Africa. And we are not proud of it, as much as you should not be proud of them. We are also not proud of this kind of leadership. We know what they're about, we know how they came about, and that's what I've tried to explain to you before now. So, but what is the way forward for Africa is what I'm telling you, that there has to be complete overhaul of our political processes and programs and projects. There has to be complete overhaul of the continent itself, diplomatically, politically, culturally, and traditionally. There has to be a total overhaul of leadership, so that we have the A team out there on the continent of Africa that can relate with the rest of the world with utmost respect. I say to myself all the time that there's no way anyone, even if you're a Boy Scout in a European country or even another African country, can respect Nigerian leaders, because I sit down with them all the time. I do interviews with them as a journalist. I talk to them and they don't have anything upstairs. So even if you want to respect us, you have nothing to respect, because you have people who you could refer to as dummies running countries that have like 200 million people. And I could name names, but you probably wouldn't know some of them. But you can do your Google search. And until Africa gets to that point where they have leaders that are competent, that have capacity, integrity, and and have character, you're not going to respect Africa. I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do about that. And that's why the younger generation of Africans, I imagine, who are speaking powerfully to the desire and need for Africa to have new set of leaders. And we're doing so unapologetically, in my own case. And as the person who introduced me mentioned to you, I've been through a lot in the hands of Nigerian leaders. I've been expelled from the university in the 90s, fought the military, fought corruption over these years. I've been in prison, in police detention several times, and all kinds of things have been done to me since I started running for the presidency about 8 months ago. I've been around Nigeria a lot. and the country is mostly ungoverned territory. So when you hear about Nigeria, you just hear about the state capitals, and of course, you're hearing about their lavish lifestyles. But over 80% of Nigerians live, in poverty. And when we say poverty, we're talking about abject poverty, to the extent that the minimum wage of a Nigerian worker is annually is less than the welfare checks you hand over to people who are jobless here, or people who are on welfare in this part of the world. It's the truth, and the reason is simple. Again, it boils down to leadership, and so it's just what I'm trying to say to you in a nutshell. For some reason, I didn't prepare for this in an elaborate way. Yes. But what you're seeing in the background here is what we started about 8 months ago. Myself and a group of Nigerians within and outside Nigeria started a political movement known as the Take It Back movement. And the Take It Back movement has some of these issues raised in here behind me as how we intend to take Nigeria out of poverty, the abject poverty I described, move Nigeria out of a responsible state of leadership that is in now, move it to progress, prosperity, and peace, so that the only thing you hear about Nigeria is not Boko Haram or terrorism, or it's not diseases, destruction, and bad leadership alone. That we can continue to see Nigeria, first and foremost, in a better light, and by extension, Africa, the continent of Africa. In fact, what we know, going by the research we've done, going by the interaction we've done on the continent of Africa, is that Africans are waiting on Nigeria to find its feet. And as soon as they do that, the continent of Africa will be a different continent, starting from that point. I came into Australia and it took me 4 hours. That's for the moment I saw the map of Australia at the beginning on the east side, to come to Brisbane, 4 hours. And if you look underneath the plane, you can see infrastructure, you can see a country somehow that is well planned, and I haven't seen a country big enough to be able to speak categorically. I've been told that Queensland, which is a state here in Australia, it's almost as big as Nigeria. It's bigger than Nigeria, right? And so it's massive, but infrastructure is working everywhere. We have great schools. I went to my friend's school today, Michael, who is one of our stars, and it's amazing how his high school looks. And my university that I graduated from some 30 years ago looked like a piggery. You can't even send your pig to go to those universities. And I'm not speaking bad about Nigeria, it's just the facts, of life in Nigeria. And so how do you get there? It's what leadership would mean, and it's what we want to do. So about 2 months ago, we started a political party registered in Nigeria, and I'm presenting myself as a candidate for the presidency of Nigeria to replace the old guys. I have two major opponents. One of them is 72 years old. The other one, officially, is about 76. But if you count his teeth, he's like 80-something years old. And so we have, the joke in Nigeria is that we are being led by our ancestors. That's the reason we don't have history. We don't, yes.
Lifeless.
Yes, yeah. I don't even want to go there yet. But this is the kind of obsolete country or leadership we have. And it's not as if we're against their age, as we usually say as younger candidates. We're just against the age of the ideas. That it cannot take a country that is as vibrant and dynamic as Nigeria to a level of progress and prosperity that is desirable at this time for us. So we're presenting ourselves, and these two guys are older than Nigeria. Nigeria got independence in 1960. Nigeria is 58 years old. The youngest of them is 72. The older is about 82 or thereabout. Nobody can really tell his age. Maybe his doctors in the UK can tell you the truth, but they never come out and tell us the truth. This is part of the problem too. Is that we don't even have hospitals that can treat our presidents based in Nigeria. So anytime he has a headache, he has flu or cold, he's put on an airplane just out of the country. He might be gone for 100 years. I mean, who cares? It's Nigeria. He comes back whenever he wants. And stupid Nigerian politicians will put a signboard at the airport welcoming him back in like huge billboards. So, without much ado, or just too much distraction or digression from where I am, I'm just speaking right from the bottom of my heart to you here. And for those of you who may not be Nigerian, speaking right from the bottom of my heart about African leadership. For me, it's nothing to write home about right now. But if we do it right, if we get it right, if we allow a generational transfer of power to more responsible, younger Nigerians who have exposure, who have integrity, like I said, character and capacity, we will find an Africa that can engage with the rest of the world with respect and with dignity. And Africa as a continent that finally will regain its foothold in amongst community of nations around the world. When I say Africa, I'm not referring to Africa as a country, but Africa as a continent, just like Australia is a continent. But we need that. We need that leadership change so bad that I can't even tell you when it should have happened. I think it should have happened even 58 years ago, so that we can not continue like this. That much I know. And for those who may not care, if things continue like this, at some point Africans will revolt, and something had to give or has to give at some point, and it's a matter of time before that will happen. I don't know where it will happen first, but pray that it doesn't happen in Nigeria, because then you are waiting for a calamity or a catastrophe that is going to involve 200 million people. The world must have to wait first if anything goes wrong in Nigeria. So on that note, I want to thank you all for coming once again. I've been told that this is supposed to be interactive, but I've mostly been speaking except for and going all over the place. So I hope you've picked up something in my talk here today that would make it possible for you to ask questions, make suggestions, and engage fruitfully. Thank you so much. There's a question at the back.
Sorry, you're going to need a microphone. Dr. Kira, maybe.
Yes. Hi everyone, my name is Obina. I'm currently a UK student. I was on campus and I thought sorry I'm late. Yeah, I had placements as a company. I may have missed some of your point, but I just want to, my real concern about all of these manifestos, as much as the many manifestos others will have least, I'm far more interested in the how, the question of how. It's not about the least, it's the how. Perhaps let me just pick one or two from there. Health and education, how do you want to get it done?
Yeah. Thank you. Are there other questions that I can take more than one question at a time?
Yeah, do you want to?
All right, okay. So, thank you. It's a very important question, and we get asked this question all the time. I will start with a how by telling you how have we gotten it wrong. And it's just why the description about African leadership is we have been putting in these places very sensitive position people who have no idea how to get anything done. So how do we get it done? Starting with health, for example, is to look at what's our population in Nigeria, what are our health needs, what are the most basic health needs we have in Nigeria. I will tell you that when it comes to health in Nigeria, we are at ground zero, almost ground zero, to the extent that most Nigerians have never seen a doctor before in their lives, and most of them have seen a pastor, they've seen an imam, they've seen a babalawo, herbalists, but they've never seen a real doctor. And the first thing to do is to actually pump people out there to start giving them a chance to see a real medical doctor. And what we want to do, starting with our program is to have over 160,000 health professionals found out there, and to then start to re-engage Nigerians who were trained as doctors who left the country, either out of frustration or annoyance or some kind of default that there's nothing else they can do. The Nigerian health minister came out recently, I think about 3 weeks ago, and granted an interview, the most bizarre interview any health minister could grant. He said he does it because doctors were upset and going on strike. He said, I don't see any reason why every doctor wants to do a doctor. He said, you don't need to be a specialist. You can be a doctor and be my tailor. He said his tailor is a doctor. So again, this is the kind of people you put in the health sector, a minister who says that you don't have to be a specialist. In a country that is in need of millions of doctors and only can boast on register of 42,000 doctors in Nigeria. So not only do we need to readmit and attract back those who have left, but we have to train new doctors. We have to encourage health professionals to be all over the place. The reason why when we were choosing our vice presidential candidate, we chose a public health professional for our party, the African Action Congress. And it is because when we did our research, when we started asking Nigerians what is most important to them, it was shocking to us that most Nigerians wanted health to be their first priority. So the next thing is to invest a good chunk of our budget in the health sector, because as it is well known and well spoken of, that health is wealth. Without people being healthy, we cannot get Africa to have the wealth that we have all been, dreaming about. So what is this going to happen is to look at what is our budget on an annual basis and how much are we dedicating and devoting to health, the health sector, and what is the real health sector that we need to start with. And I think the investment has to go into the primary health sector first, because you look at people who are most vulnerable, they are women and children. A lot of women who get pregnant don't actually get to deliver their babies. The ones who get to deliver mostly die before the babies are delivered during delivery. And most kids don't have access to what you take for granted here, immunization. They're not immunized against all kinds of killer diseases. So most kids end up dying in a high infant mortality rate in Nigeria. I don't need to repeat that anywhere. We are part of whatever terrible statistics out there in terms of health. So it's to look at how do we take care of all these people by way of investments, by way of making sure that at every level that we can provide primary health care first, that we do that. And then, of course, we go to the secondary ones where general hospitals across the country, they exist, by the way. They do exist right now, but they are in dilapidated conditions, that we start reviving them. And interestingly, we are hearing from a lot of Nigerians who are medical professionals abroad that if we can provide the enabling environment for them to come back home, they will even come back home and work for free. Some of them have contacted us that they want to do telemedicine. What is telemedicine is that, look, we can remain here in Australia, but provide a hotline for somebody who is in need of medical help to call a number, and we can provide telephone-based kind of medical support immediately to say, okay, this is the kind of, if you tell me your symptoms, this is the kind of medicine you can take to relieve you of that. And then they can have a team that is coming in to visit Nigeria from time to time, as they do in Ghana. So there are a lot of ways that this will happen. And I'm just giving you some of the hows that we intend to do this. When you talk about education, you have to look at how many kids are there out of school. 13 million kids in Nigeria out of school. I mean, they have never been to primary school before. You know what primary school is, right? They've never been in school. They've never been within the walls of primary school before. And what do we want to do? How? We want to invest 100,000 naira each on each of those kids to bring them back to school, so that just like you do here, we can criminalize sending your children to hawk on the streets instead of going to school. Because if you don't go to school over here, and the school will come to you, call the father, call the mom, what's wrong? In the US, where I lived for 19 years, if you don't send your child to school, police is going to come knock your door in the evening and ask you why you're keeping your child away from school. that should be the way it is in Nigeria if we make the right investments, And today, even Wharton, Liberia, the president of Liberia just made tuition free in Liberia for their students. We will do the same in Nigeria because we have realized, and this is something we're doing even when we're student activists, that it was better to invest in health and education in particular than to invest in other things that we told will make Africa great and prosperous. It never happened. What did the World Bank and IMF come back to do about 2 weeks ago? They came to apologize to us 30 years later that we have been heading in the wrong direction. Their policy advice, which was basically the structural adjustment program, was not going to help Africa to attain prosperity. It was health and education that would have done it for us. Because that is what did it for you guys in Australia, and it's doing it for you in Australia, is what is doing it for them in India today. And every country that is doing well globally, they are doing it based on education, and education is what is going to bring about great health. But in Nigeria, we were just told to go and do whatever we can do, as long as Nigeria was properly prepared for Western countries that wanted to bring in their products into Nigeria. As long as Nigeria was prepared for the kind of privatization that would have priced great living for the people of Africa. That was what the economic policies that were thrown at Africa was about, through the structural adjustment programs that we fought against that led some of us to be expelled from the university and even spend some time in prison. So there's a lot more ways that we'll break down to you. But unfortunately, our party has been suffering in the hands of our opponent parties. Every time we break down ideas, they steal them and appropriate them to themselves. So when we give out a breakdown of ideas, the next thing, the ruling party will steal the idea from us and they will not even give us credit for it. So we are being careful not to expose too much. Sorry, yes.
That's plagiarism.
What?
That's plagiarism.
Well, I don't even know what to call it. But we know that they will steal anything, So I think it's content stealing. They steal our content and apply, including today before I came here. If anybody was following us, we were talking about Badagry Expressway that doesn't have express included in it. So we talked about, because we went to Badagry, it took us about 6 hours to go to Badagry and come back, which typically should have been 30 minutes. And we said, that Badagry people should succeed from Nigeria. That's how we describe it. Yesterday they met at the Federal Executive meeting and allocated money to that road. But it probably is a gimmick, it won't be done. We know that. But this is how they've been engaging with us and engaging with our ideas that we've been putting out there. People can, of course, download this and read more. Everything I'm telling you is broken down, even in the document that we have uploaded here, so it's not difficult to find. But I'm just kind of breathing life into it by way of engagement and interacting with the content you have behind me as to how best we can pull Nigeria out of poverty by investing a lot in education and health, as opposed to investing in politicians and their lavish lifestyles.
Thank you very much. My name is Ruben. And let me first start by answering one question, or should I say suspicion you have about Australia, if you're trying to dig into what role they are playing in Africa.
Yeah.
Well, for now, so far, I can actually, let me say I'm in testimony, because I'm actually here on scholarship, fully funded by the Australian government.
Wow, that's good.
And at least I can attest to the fact that there are so many people. In short, I'll be leaving, I'm finishing tomorrow, and then I'll be going back in December.
Congratulations.
So we had this pre-departure briefing. And I remember very well, when we were having a pre-departure briefing, those who oversee the scholarship program in Nigeria, the person came, and what she told me was, this time around, the next batch of awardees will be starting in January next year. And in the whole of Africa, Nigeria actually got the highest score. It's over 30 people. Wow. When I came, we were over 5,000 who had applied. Only 8 of us were taken. So for me, it's a plus. And having said that, one important issue, and I truly want to appreciate you for one thing you've done. And I also I follow that path. And, it's a problem for most Nigerians, especially for those of us who have the exposure or opportunity to, go outside the shores of Nigeria. In terms of being honest or being sincere about the situation of things in Nigeria, a lot of Nigerians don't want to be honest about it. People want you to talk about Nigerians being corrupt or things are bad. They don't. But then I'm someone that believes that if you have a problem, until you admit and you acknowledge that that problem is there, you can't solve it. One key problem we have is security. I was born and brought up, spent almost all my life living in northern parts of Nigeria. I grew there, schooled there. I worked for over 7 years before I came here. I have been fortunate to have escaped the suicide bombing, Boko Haram attack in Bauchi State in 2012.
Wow.
So I know the situation there. There are times when I'm driving, ordinarily from Abuja to Bauchi, if you're driving, you take about 4 hours drive. But then sometimes it takes me about 8 hours, because the road is not safe. Checkpoints and all that. And this one is a serious problem. And there are agitations from certain parts of this end. Let's separate. But then I believe you're running for president and you want to you're not looking at separating or pulling Nigeria apart. So what's your approach towards security? That's one thing. And also the other one is what's your concern about food? Food production is really important.
Food security.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much. Before you praise Australia too much, I was actually setting a trap for you guys. Now you fell into it. This currency in my pocket is made in Australia, right? Have you guys heard about Securrency? A company in Australia that makes currency. They're actually involved in a corruption scandal in Nigeria. So I caught you guys red-handed. Now you know. So they make this currency supposed to be transparent. By the time they got involved with Nigeria, they had a deal with the Central Bank of Nigeria and it involved a lot of corruption. I don't know if the people involved were eventually punished in Australia, but the ones in Nigeria only got political and social promotion. The more money you steal in Nigeria, the better. So Australia has been, some Australians too were involved, but that is not to overshadow the great things that they've done with you guys. You see, Nigeria used to be such that we not only sent our children to school abroad, we used to pay salaries of countries that had, financial problems. We were the Father Christmas to Cuba, to Ghana, to South Africa at a point. It was a reason why when I went to South Africa, South Africans were mistreating Nigerians. I got upset because I knew when we were growing up and we were fighting apartheid on the streets of Lagos and elsewhere in Nigeria on behalf of South Africans. And when apartheid eventually collapsed, Nigeria had gone so badly, terribly down the toilet of leadership that South Africa became a star on the continent of Africa as opposed to Nigeria. So, but answering the question of security, yes, we have Boko Haram in Nigeria, we have herdsmen, but the leadership in Nigeria is so horrible that every security issue in Nigeria escalates to something terrible. When kidnapping got to Nigeria, it attained a different dimension. I mean, at a point, a friend of mine went to Nigeria to bury his parents, was in Southeast. They had to bring the parents for the father who died to Lagos for them to, because if they travel to the east during that time, when kidnapping was bad, there's no way you make it out. That was how bad it was. So they had to do the burial, part of the burial in Lagos, and then went back to go to the US and they took the body back to the east. It got to a point they were kidnapping people for recharge cards. I'm sure some people don't know what recharge cards are here.
What about me?
It was that bad. Every security challenge in Nigeria has escalated to the worst. Security challenges in Nigeria didn't start with Boko Haram. It started in recent times with Niger Delta militants. But each time there's a security problem in Nigeria, there's always complicity from the highest levels of the Nigerian military. Either they're selling weapons directly to militants, or they are overlooking how to defeat the militants because of what they are directly benefiting from the security imbroglio in the country. And we've seen that happen when Buhari came to power in 2015. They went around arresting military generals, Air Force generals, naval generals, and they found monies hidden everywhere in their houses. Some of them they put in sewage tanks, some of them had under their cooking pots. There was money by these generals all over the place. There was an army general who was the chief of defense staff. His name is Bade. His village was overrun by Boko Haram, and the soldiers ran away from the village. But because his dogs were trapped in his house, he sent a helicopter, a military helicopter, to go and retrieve his dogs, and left his other villagers at the mercy of Boko Haram until Buhari came, and then they were able to drive Boko Haram away from the village again. So one of the things I propose is that, and I mean this seriously, there has to be an overhaul of the Nigerian military, especially at the leadership. The leadership is rotten. They are not interested in defeating Boko Haram because it brings in a lot of money for them. Even the idea of negotiating with Boko Haram to release girls is big business in Nigeria for these military leaders or the secret police. So until you do something about them, you are not going to defeat Boko Haram. You are asking yourself as a Nigerian all the time, where is it that Boko Haram gets its weapons from and the Nigerian states cannot get weapons from to defeat a ragtag army like Boko Haram? Is a problem of leadership in the military and corruption within the ranks and file of the Nigerian military. I have been a reporter for several years and found out when Buhari came out, his chief of army staff, which is still retained till now, bought houses in Dubai. And everybody is asking, where did he get money to buy houses in Dubai? So these are the kind of problems you have in the security sector. And I think the second question you asked was food security. See, Nigeria is capable of feeding itself and feeding even half of Africa. But as you know, the most fertile areas of Nigeria, or farming or agriculture, has been abandoned because of cheap oil wealth. Oil is what everybody is going to Abuja to collect money from at the end of the month. So nobody is growing crops anymore. Those days they used to teach us about cash crops. We still have them, but nobody is farming. Because the easiest way to make money is to go to Abuja, and share the oil money, and then the bankers will do round tripping, and everybody is happy. At the end of the day, the people are poorer, But what is terrible about Nigerians, I have to say, with due respect to our people, is you cannot understand how people suffer so much, and they understand the source of their suffering, but they are the first to clap for their oppressors. And it is happening in this election now. The two candidates that are competing against us are the worst criminals you can find, and there's records, so we have records to show that they will lead this country down the path of perdition. But people are clapping for them. Young people are on Twitter as we speak here now saying that they're articulating, and we need to deactivate that kind of mindset in Nigeria for Nigeria to move. There are others who are supporting Buhari who clearly doesn't even know what he's doing. The man has dementia, he's sick. Most of our leaders are sick, very sick and tired people. But we keep promoting them. So sometimes you wonder what's wrong with us, and that is what we're about to change going forward. So I think we've run out of time.
We are mindful of time.
Yes.
We're mindful of time.
Yes.
We want to thank you so much, Mr. Sowore. Can we give a round of applause? I'll call on Dr. Afolabi to give a vote of thanks. I believe some of us will still have questions, and if you have some time, you might want to stay back to have a chat with Mr. Sowore after now. Professor. How do we hand this over to you?
Yeah, I think my voice should be loud enough.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
I don't need a microphone.
Go ahead.
First and foremost, I need to apologize for coming a bit late.
No problem.
I had to drive 7 hours.
Wow.
Down here, so Unfortunately, I couldn't meet Mr. Omoyele's presentation, but at the same time, I'm glad that we have young minds here at Queensland, University of Queensland. Currently, I work with the University of New England. I'm a lecturer in criminology, so I just felt this is about Nigeria, and this is about our future. Some of us have been able to escape out of Nigeria, and here in Australia, United States of America, United Kingdom, everywhere. But we have the majority of Nigerians back home. They don't have any options, nowhere to run to.
That's right.
And each time I think about my family, I think about my siblings, cousins, uncle, aunts, and everybody, the project Nigeria becomes a burden. And it's not just a burden that should be carried by individuals. It should be a collective effort. We should, as in all of us, should come together and rescue Nigeria. And if we must rescue Nigeria, it goes beyond rhetoric. It goes beyond business as usual. Nigeria is at a critical point where if we don't do anything, I'm sorry to say, I don't want to become a prophet of doom, but Nigeria is standing on the precipice, and at any time, the nation can collapse. And if Nigeria must not collapse, it's going to take young mindset, people like us, to come together to fight for the soul of Nigeria. And I want to thank Mr. Omoyele and the other young people coming out at this critical time. Even if at the end of the election, wherever the pendulum swings, I think we've sent a message to the old men and women back home that the young people, they are actually ready to fight for the soul of Nigeria. And I want to challenge each and every one of us. Don't think because you live in Australia that you've escaped. I want us, each time we think, let's think about Nigeria. Let's find ways to participate in government. As some of you know, I do a lot of live video and all this, but that's not the key factor here. But the major thing is that if I can't go and live in Nigeria, if it's going to take me to change one mindset, I'm committed to that. So the question is, what are you committed to? Whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Muslim, whichever religion you belong to, even if you're a free thinker, don't forget Nigeria. Let's not forget that. Let's fight for Nigeria. And I have hope. I'm very sure that someday Nigeria will become a great nation. So once again, thank you for all, thank you all for coming here, and thank you, Mr. Omoyele, all the way from the United States of America.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Very quick.